Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the absolute best leveling builds for Necromancer in Season 2, Season of the Blood, for leveling, so you guys can get to the end game as fast as humanly possible, super efficiently, while also just having a ton of fun, and just blasting the entire way through. Necromancer actually has like two very good options for leveling, one of which is by far the best leveling build in the game if you plan on playing solo and you don't really care to use minions. That is going to be a Blood Surge build, which people have gotten like world records with, which is the gameplay that I'm showing right now. Blood Surge is unbelievably insane for leveling. However, a lot of Necromancer players aren't going to want to play solo, and I think Blood Surge falls off when you're not playing solo, but also you might want to use minions. So the good old-fashioned Bone Spear plus minion combo is actually insane for leveling. Even though Bone Spear did get nerfed, a lot of those nerfs actually don't affect it at all while leveling. It's mainly endgame nerfs. So while you're leveling, you can still use Bone Spear paired with minions, and you'll level extremely quickly, especially if you plan on playing with multiple people. It'll just scale better, and you'll get to take advantage of minions, which a ton of people really love to do. So I'll quickly go over both builds with you guys, talk about their strengths and weaknesses, go over which legendaries you want to use, and even mention some of the new Vampiric Powers, and give you guys all the necessary information so you guys can just blast to the end game as fast as possible. Necromancer is by far probably the best leveling class in the game right now, and I think you guys are going to have a fantastic time leveling on it. But not only is it one of the best leveling classes in the game, it seems like with a lot of the changes, it will probably be one of the best endgame classes, especially with minion builds, or even Blood Surge builds, or even some damage over time Shadow Blight sort of stuff. Necromancer seems like it's going to be absolutely insane. So let's just get into it. Before we get into things, I want to give a big thanks to today's sponsor, Factor. Factor 75 offers ready-made meals with a difference, combining the convenience of something that you can have ready in just minutes while not compromising on the quality. Order a day, a week, or even a month's worth of food and just wait for it to arrive at your doorstep. Factor 75 offers keto, low-calorie, vegan, vegetarian options, and even more, so you can very easily stick to your health goals. All you need is somewhere to heat it up and the time written on the box. No time wasted shopping, preparing, cleaning up, and more time for the things that you love. Factor 75 delivers meals prepared by real chefs who know how to make delicious, no-nonsense food that can be ready in just 2 minutes. Not only are Factor's meals nutritious and full of good ingredients, but it's also good for your wallet. Not having to rely on takeout when you need a quick meal is a massive time and money saver. Simply nothing is more convenient than having delicious meals ready to eat at a minute's notice, and it personally has massively reduced the amount of money that I waste on food, with the added benefit of eating higher quality food that I can just grab right out of the fridge and eat within minutes, so I don't have to take any time away from grinding out my perfect build. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code 250 to get 50% off your first Factor box, and a big thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Also, if you guys have any questions, feel free to check me out over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Nick2. I'll be grinding an absolutely insane amount, and I will be testing a ton of builds. Also, feel free to subscribe because I will have an endgame version of Necro posted literally within a few days of the season coming out. So if you guys, probably by the time you guys are done watching this, or done leveling at least, I'll probably have an endgame build ready. So feel free to subscribe if you haven't, but let's just get into it. All right, so because I'm going to be covering two builds, I'm going to be fairly quick with them. However, if you guys want a detailed, how you want to spend each individual point, I will have that posted over on my website, so you guys can just very easily reference that while leveling. Literally just slap it on the other monitor or on your phone or whatever, and you can just see, okay, level 1, spend my point there, level 2, spend my point there, etc. It'll be very quick, and I'll have it for both of the builds. We're going to start off with the Blood Surge build, which again, I think the main strength of this is if you are playing solo and you are trying to grind as fast as humanly possible. This is going to be literally the best build in the game. But if you're playing in a group and you'd rather utilize some sort of minion stuff, which you could actually implement some minions with the Blood Surge build, but it pairs a little bit more nicely with Bone Spear, and you don't really need the minions for Blood Surge. But if you want to use minions and stuff and you plan on playing in a group, then I would recommend Bone Spear, which I will have, timestamped down below. So feel free to skip to the Bone Spear section. All right, getting into the skill points. Sorry if this will take a little bit, but I just want to be a little bit detailed with you guys so you know exactly why we're spending the skill points. There is no set in stone guaranteed best way to spend them, but I think I've devised a pretty decent way for speed leveling and also just giving you all of your bases covered, survivability, damage, etc. Again, if you want to be able to very quickly reference all the skill points while leveling, I have it on my website, which I will literally be referencing myself, so you'll probably see me looking over there a good bit. So first off, we're going to start with Reap as our basic skill. The reason for Reap is just because it generates essence based on multiple enemies, which is pretty good. It gives us damage reduction, and also if we kill enemies, it gives us attack speed. While leveling with this build, essence really doesn't become that big of a deal, because ideally we are doing very high density dungeons with this build because it is a speed farming build, and because of that, all of our essence is basically solved by Iron Maiden, which I'll get into in a minute, so we don't have to use our basic skill all that often. Keep in mind that the world record holder does like to use Hemorrhage, mainly for the additional essence after picking up Blood Orbs, I believe. But personally, I'm not a huge fan of Hemorrhage. Just keep that in mind. If you want to use that, feel free. Not really that big of a deal. Then we're going to slam 5 points into Blood Surge. Obviously, we get Enhanced Blood Surge for some extra survivability, which is pretty sick benefit of using Blood Surge. And then we just have Paranormal. The reason that Blood Surge is very good to begin with is it just does good damage. Like, that's pretty much it. While leveling, it doesn't really need all that much to just do a lot of damage, and it just hits everything in a pretty wide cone. And you can also get a very good legendary for it early on through the codex. So Blood Surge is just really good for leveling, and as you can see in the gameplay, you just absolutely annihilate everything. But also, because it's a blood build, you can end up building into Overpower a pretty good bit, which actually got significantly buffed in this season. So a lot of the gameplay that you're seeing is actually pre-buff. So now that it's getting buffed and a lot of other things got nerfed, such as crit, etc., this build is just going to be even better than it was. And with Paranormal, every 1 in 6 cast is a guaranteed Overpower, which isn't all that great on its own, because ideally each Blood Surge is going to kill stuff. But when you have a really tanky elite or something, this is pretty good. But when we get into our capstone, we can actually end up overpowering way more often. Later into the game, you may end up swapping to Supernatural, but for leveling, Paranormal definitely seems to be the way to go. I'm just going to slam 3 points into Spiked Armor for Thorns. It's just nice for extra damage overall. Later into the game, you're definitely going to take this off, but very early on, it actually is surprisingly good. It just does a lot of extra damage for you, pretty much for free. Then we're going to go Iron Maiden and Enhance Iron Maiden. As long as you're fighting a lot of enemies, Iron Maiden is just going to give you a ton of essence, literally for free. Just walk up to enemies, boom, press it, 25 essence if there's 5 enemies, which 5 enemies is a pretty low requirement to have, and that's enough for 1 entire Blood Surge. So Iron Maiden is insane. It pretty much becomes your basic skill, and it also curses enemies, which is good for other things later into the game. But that's pretty much your essence. If you're not doing like high density dungeons, your essence may be a little bit rough, in which case you'll have to use your basic skill a little bit more often. Now that we've gotten that, we're going to go 3 into Death's Embrace, literally just for additional damage and also damage reduction. Alternatively, you can go for Death's Reach as well, which we will go for in a second, but honestly, it's pretty minor stuff here. Then we're going to go into Corpse Tendrils. The reason for Corpse Tendrils is because eventually we're going to put on Grasping Veins Legendary, which is absolutely insane, but also it's just really nice for stunning enemies, having a guaranteed stun, and it could work very well with some of the Vampiric Powers. And early on, slapping 1 point into it is very, very low cost, and it will definitely help you out at some point. But also, you can get a ton of Blood Orbs from Corpse Tendrils, which will actually end up being very, very good once we grab our capstone. So Corpse Tendrils, I mean, if you've played Necromancer at all, you know how insane Corpse Tendrils is. Now that we've got that, we're just going to get a crap ton of damage. So we go 1 point into Gruesome Mending, and then 3 into Coalesce Blood for just a ton of extra damage. 3 into Tides of Blood, so anytime we overpower, we do a whole bunch of extra damage. 3 into Death's Reach for extra damage against distance, so we have damage against close and distance to cover both of our bases, because Blood Surge actually can hit enemies that are technically distant, because close range is pretty small. And then 3 points into Amplify Damage, as we are using a Curse skill, so that's just a ton of extra damage for us. If you want more survivability, you could go into Abhorrent Iron Maiden, which I'm just going to grab for free. If you don't feel like you need the healing at all, because Blood Surge does heal you, feel free to just omit it, and you could grab a Blood Mist at this point. And then we're going to put 1 point into Transfusion and then grab our capstone. The reason for this is this actually got changed. I'll have to show you guys this on the website because the change is not yet implemented into the game. But basically, Transfusion makes it to where you have a lucky hit chance where your blood skills have a pretty small chance to spawn a blood orb. This is good. It's only every 4 seconds, so it's not like insane or anything. But it's good because it pairs with the newly changed Rathma's Vigor, where after being healthy for 12 seconds, your next blood skill is a guaranteed overpower. And overpower, as we know, is going to do a crap ton of damage for us. But the timer at which you have to be healthy is reduced by 2 seconds each time you pick up a blood orb. So if you're spawning a whole bunch of blood orbs, which we're going to be doing through Transfusion, even though it does have a cooldown, and then we're also going to be doing through Blighted Corpse Tendrils here, where you spawn blood orbs, we're going to be overpowering significantly more often, and that's just going to massively increase our damage output. So we're going to go the 1 point into Transfusion, 1 point into Rathma's Vigor, and then we're going to slam those other 2 points into Transfusion just to increase your lucky hit chance, which unfortunately you can't see in game, but you will see once the season is actually live, right? And then at this point, if you want more blood orbs to just build more into the overpower stuff, you could go into Enhanced Corpse Tendrils and then Blighted Corpse Tendrils for even more blood orbs. It's not super insane, and personally, I'm going to just get a little bit more straight up damage by getting Unliving Energy and then Imperfectly Balanced for literally just 15% extra damage. Even though stuff does cost a little bit more essence, it's perfectly fine. Then I'll grab the Corpse Tendrils with the blood orb stuff. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to grab Blood Mist just for an overpower and some, or not overpower, just for the survivability here. And again, if you didn't take Abhorrent, you could put 1 point into Enhanced Blood Mist. So anytime you overpower, you reduce the cooldown. And later into the game, when you're just spamming overpowers over and over, I think that'll be really good for Blood Mist. You'll just have a super low cooldown Blood Mist, so that'll be fantastic. And then we're just going to get some more survivability. So standalone is really good for just 18% damage reduction all the time. And then we're also going to buff our Memento Mori sacrifices, which is just a whole bunch of extra damage for us as well. At this point, I'm going to go into Bloodstorm just because might as well. You could definitely feel free to get this way earlier on than I did, but Bloodstorm really isn't all that good because the cooldown is just so high. You kind of just have the points here to do whatever you want with, so that's why I felt like getting that. And then I'm going to go 3 points into Inspiring Leader here, just to increase our attack speed after we are healthy. 12% attack speed isn't insane. It's not going to feel too crazy. Definitely could feel free to put that into something else if you wanted. If there's something specific you want, like Necrotic Carapace, maybe for a little bit more fortified generation. And then I'm going to go 3 points into Drain Vitality, which is actually going to be very good because all Fortify stuff has changed from base life to maximum life, and having a lucky hit chance to fortify you, you're going to be fortifying yourself like crazy, and overpowers actually scale off of fortify, so that's going to be extremely strong for us. And it's also going to give you a lot of survivability because you'll basically have fortify up all the time. You could definitely feel free to grab this earlier, maybe when you got standalone. It really just depends, but it'll be a little bit difficult to scale early on because you want a lot of maximum HP in order to scale this pretty good, and you don't overpower a crazy amount until you start spawning a crap ton of blood orbs. But overall, I think this is a pretty good way to set it up. I'll briefly go over the Book of the Dead. So we're literally just sacrificing the entire way. However, if you really wanted to mess with minions, you could very easily do that with the build. You could actually just go with like Skirmishers or Reapers, up to you. And then instead of spending like 3 points on the Thorns or 3 points on like Death's Reach or something, you could just slam 3 points into Skeletal Warrior Mastery and even 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery if you really wanted to put minions into the build. But it's really not necessary. Like Blood Surge kind of just carries you already. So we're just going to go for the crit chance here with the Skirmishers, and then we're going to go Skeletal Mages with the overpower damage here. It actually did get nerfed, but it is pretty good. Eventually, if you start always applying Vulnerable with Corpse Tendrils, which you could do by just taking Blighted off and putting Plagued for 3 seconds of Vulnerable application, which is going to be pretty good for you as well. You could go for the Vulnerable damage instead if there's like really tanky elites, but you should be able to kill stuff perfectly fine without it. In which case, you could also just decide to play with Cold Mages and have them give you Essence, which is actually pretty good. A lot of variants here, kind of just play with whatever you want, but if you want like a guaranteed set in stone way that'll be really good, just go for the sacrifices, right? And then for the Golems, it kind of doesn't matter. These are all pretty weak because you're not going to have like 30% crit damage is really, really good, but you're not going to have too much crit chance early on, so it's going to be not great. And 10% attack speed is also pretty lame, but you don't really want to put the Golem on your bar, right? So kind of just up to you. I would just go for the attack speed, generally speaking, and then once you start to get more crit chance, then you want to go for the Iron Sacrifice. When it comes to the legendaries that you want, I would highly recommend getting the Blood Bathe aspect early on. It'll just significantly buff Blood Surge's overall damage output, so that'll be really nice for you. You can just go get that guaranteed by doing Hoarfrost Demise, which is like, I don't know, level 20 dungeon maybe at most. Just slam this, go get it, put it on an amulet or something, and just keep that amulet on for a while. It is expensive to imprint, so don't imprint on like a weapon. Another thing that's very good is Aspect of Grasping Veins. This did get pretty significantly nerfed, but it is still very, very good, 10% crit chance, and you're going to be using your Corpse Tendrils quite a lot. So I would recommend getting this, but it is a level 45 dungeon, so probably go and get it around level 45. Outside of that, the only other thing worth getting out of your way for, or going out of your way for, from Codex is going to be Aspect of Potent Blood. If you need a lot of additional essence generation, if you feel like that is worthwhile to you, you could go and get this. I don't remember what level this dungeon is. I'm going to guess 20 to 30, so you could probably get it pretty early. Again, imprinting is pretty expensive, but this is very nice essence gen, because anytime you just pick up a blood orb, which you're going to be doing quite a lot, you'll get some essence. Otherwise, I mean, the typical stuff is going to be pretty good for you. Aspect of Might, Aspect of Disobedience for some survivability, Edge Master's Aspect just to do extra damage, Aspect of Expectance, okay. Don't worry too much about legendaries, you'll just get them while leveling up. And we'll talk about Vampiric Powers at the end of the video. I'll go over both of them for Bone Spear and Blood Surge. When it comes to your gear, I wouldn't worry too much about it, to be honest with you. The only thing that I would really go out of your way to look for is getting ranks to Blood Surge on your gloves. Other than that, try to get like crit chance on your gloves and just try to get like straight up raw damage, like damage with blood skills or damage to enemies that are close, damage to distant enemies, etc. Try to get movement speed on your boots so you just run a little bit faster, and also just prioritize equipping the best weapon that drops at any time. That's why you don't want to imprint on a weapon, because it's expensive, but also weapons scale your damage the most, right? So as you're leveling, always look out for new weapons. Otherwise, honestly, the stats and stuff doesn't really matter that much. Just look for stuff that gives you flat damage. All right, now let's go over the Bone Spear build. So the benefit of the Bone Spear build is we're going to be taking pretty heavy advantage of minions, and also Bone Spear still is unbelievably insane while you are leveling up. Bone Spear got significantly nerfed in the end game because they nerfed how crit damage works. It's effectively additive at this point, and the Bone Spear build stacked like 500% crit damage, right? Also, they significantly nerfed Ossified Essence, but this only scaled up a lot when you had a ton of essence, which we really never had while leveling to begin with. So this build's power level while leveling is effectively the same, if not slightly better, because minions got better and because the vulnerable application very early on is just really, really powerful. So even though Bone Spear is going to get nerfed, this is still very, very good, just getting yourself into the end game. And it's a very easy build to transition from using minions into the end game, and it will be extremely good for completing the capstone as well, because Bone Spear still just does extremely high damage at a base value. You could easily decide to use this build without minions, to be honest with you, but I think the minions are, I mean, they got buffed pretty significantly, and they were already really good for leveling, so I would recommend using the minions. When it comes to the skill points, again, the entire thing will be over on the website, so you can just copy paste exactly how you want to spend the skill points. I myself am going to be referencing it right now, so if you see me looking over here, that's because I'm looking at the skill points. So we're going to go into Reap and then Enhanced Reap. The reason for this is just because Reap gives us a whole bunch of essence based on enemies hit, while all the other ones are just one enemy. So if there's 3 enemies, you get 12 essence, which a lot of the time there will be. It also gives you damage reduction and attack speed, which I think is really good, and the range at which it hits is also nice. Also, we can use Acolyte's Reap, which works very, very well for a guaranteed corpse spawn. So we can just hit an enemy with Reap, spawn a corpse, and then we can use that corpse to use corpse tendrils and pull everything in. And then we only have to use one Bone Spear to kind of blow up the whole map, rather than having to use multiple to kill enemies that are all scattered around. Now that we grabbed that, we're just going to go into Bone Spear, Enhanced Bone Spear, and then Supernatural Bone Spear. This is just to give us a guaranteed vulnerable application literally right off the rip, which is insane. They did nerf vulnerable significantly. However, at the rip, it is still very good, just 20% additional damage all the time. And I do think vulnerable will still be worth getting to some extent. So having this early on is just going to be great. Then we're just going to absolutely max out Bone Spear to increase our overall damage. Then we're going to go into Corpse Explosion, literally just so that we can get 3 points into Grim Harvest here, so we get a whole bunch of essence anytime that we consume a corpse. Typically, I used to go for Fueled by Death right here, but I think if we are using the Skeletal Warriors, which are going to be pretty strong because they got buffed, I would just slam the 3 points into Skeletal Warrior Mastery. However, if you feel like they're not doing that great, feel free to just not put these points here. 3 points of the Skeletal Warrior Mastery is pretty good. And in terms of Book of the Dead, we're going to be using the Skirmishers with just summoning an additional Skirmisher Warrior. These guys actually got buffed, so I think it'll be pretty good compared to the Reapers, but if you feel like you'd rather use a Reaper, feel free to just use that once you unlock them. I'm not entirely sure the math on like which one is technically better. Feel free to just try it out yourself, but I think early on, you can't go wrong with the summoning an additional Skirmisher Warrior. At this point, I'm going to grab Iron Maiden with Enhanced Iron Maiden. This is just going to give us a whole bunch of essence. If there's 5 guys nearby, you slam this down, that's 25 essence. That's nearly enough for a Bone Spear. And also, anytime you Corpse Tendril a bunch of guys together, which is going to be the next thing that we're going to grab, and then you use Iron Maiden, you just got a whole bunch of essence, which literally paid for a Bone Spear by itself, right? But you're also going to have a whole bunch of essence anytime you just spam Corpse Explosions because you have Grim Harvest. If you feel like your essence is perfectly fine without Grim Harvest, just using Iron Maiden, definitely feel free to omit this, but I do think it is pretty good. You will just be spamming corpses a little bit, which can be kind of annoying, but you're going to do that anyway to spawn some of your minions. At this point, we have unlocked our Skeletal Mages, which are pretty insane. We're going to just buff these guys. These guys do a crap ton of damage early on. And when it comes to Book of the Dead for the Skeletal Mages, ideally we want to go for Cold early on, because this just gives us a crap ton of essence. Each time they do damage, you get a whole bunch of essence back. So again, you could take Grim Harvest off if you feel like you're capped on essence, but you want to be having a lot of essence for your Bone Spear spamming, right? You could also go into Shadow, like early on, you just go into Shadow with the Fire 4th attack. I think you get this at level 22 or something, I don't really remember, but yeah, getting the essence from those guys is really good. If you want some more survivability, you can go for Abhorrent Iron Maiden. Each time you kill an enemy, you just heal for a crap ton of your HP, and we're going to be using Iron Maiden quite frequently, right? So that ends up being pretty good for us. And then we're going to go 3 points into Death's Reach here for just 12% additional damage to distant enemies. And then at any point, you can grab Blood Mist just for the Overpower, or why do I keep calling Overpower? For the Unstoppable and for the Immunity. If you feel like you need the survivability here, it's just really, really good having a straight up immunity, right? And then we'll go 3 points into Amplified Damage, as we are using our Iron Maiden pretty frequently for just 12% extra damage. And again, paired with Corpse Tendrils, This is just an insane combo. Stunning everything, bringing it all in together, and then you slam that down, 12% extra damage, you kill everything, you get essence, you heal. Like, it's insane. We'll go 3 points into Inspiring Leader, literally just for additional attack speed for us and also our minions. At this point, we have access to our capstone. Ossified Essence got significantly nerfed, but if you feel like the majority of your damage is from Bone Spear, then you can definitely just slam this into Ossified Essence. But Callan's Edict is probably going to be a little bit better depending upon how good the minions are actually faring. So it's really just up to you whether or not you want the damage to be improved on your end or if you want your minions to do more damage. But 30% attack speed ends up being pretty significantly strong. So I would recommend that, and a lot of you guys do really like to use the minions. Feel free to just omit minions entirely from this build though if you want. Like, just don't spec into anything minion related, and you could just buff up your damage more individually. But again, the minions early on, I think, is really strong. At this point, we'll just grab a little bit more damage in the form of 1 point into Unliving Energy, 3 points into Imperfectly Balanced, and then we can just get a little bit more essence with Unliving Energy. This really isn't all that necessary. It's good if you want to scale Ossified Essence, and it's just good for more of a cushion so we can spam more Bone Spears. But it isn't particularly insane. If you wanted to buff your minions before then, you could just go 3 points into Hellbent Commander, so they just do 30% extra damage rather than getting the Unliving Energy and Imperfectly Balanced. Again, just gauge whether or not like the majority of your damage is you or the minions. I'm going to go 3 points into Death's Defense here. This actually got baked into the kit baseline, which is a massive buff for minions. You have this by default. And what it does now, which I can't show you guys because it's not in the game yet, but basically just increases their armor and resistance. So it just makes the minions way tankier in addition to getting the old Death's Defense, which is literally mandatory so that they don't just get one shot all the time. Now I'm just going to get 3 points into Death's Embrace, so we just deal extra damage to close enemies and we take less damage, so that is particularly good for us. At this point we have a few extra points we can just slam for damage, so I'm just going to go for Fueled by Death, and then by now you probably don't have as many essence problems, so you could take the points out of Grim Harvest, and then you could just start maxing out Serration, max out Compound Fracture, and max out Avulsion. Actually, we'll only go 1 point into Serration and max out Avulsion, because that's just a ton of extra damage if we are critting quite a lot, and Compound Fracture is also just extra damage for us, with our Bone Spear only though. Keep in mind, this is only the damage for our Bone Spear. Once you're late into the game at this point, like level 50 or so, you could determine whether or not minions are worth keeping. If you feel like they aren't really doing all that much for you, just take all the points out of it, swap the Ossified Essence. Again, I'll quickly recap the Book of the Dead for you guys. So while leveling, I'd recommend just going Skirmisher with 1 warrior. Try out Reapers and see if that is better for you. The Reapers with the first thing is pretty good since we are using Corpse Tendrils and we are slowing them and also making enemies vulnerable all the time. So that could be good. Just try that out yourself. It's kind of hard to tell because the changes for the Skirmishers aren't in the game yet, so I can't really tell which ones will be better. When it comes to the mages, you just want to go cold all the way for the extra essence generation, and then when it comes to Golem, you could decide to actually play with Golem. So I didn't mention this, but you could decide to play with Golem, in which case you would take the points out of Corpse Explosion and you would literally just put on Golem, and then you could put 3 points into Golem Mastery instead of putting some points into Compound Fracture or whatever else. Personally, I've never really liked the Golem all that much, and I just like having the Corpse Explosion for the guaranteed essence generation, but Golem got like a major buff, right? I haven't really played with it all that much. I think the best version of the Golem is probably the Blood, and then while healthy, your Blood Golem gains damage reduction and extra damage. So if you really wanted to play like Super Minion, that's definitely what you would do. Alternatively though, if you want to sacrifice, just early on sacrifice for the attack speed, and then later on, once you have a little bit more crit on your gear and stuff, then you sacrifice the Iron Golem for the extra crit damage. When it comes to legendaries that you care about for, how do I get here, dude? I don't have it keybound, I guess. When it comes to legendaries for this build, don't worry too much about it. The only thing that's particularly good is Grasping Veins, but you can't get this till like level 45. So I wouldn't really worry about it. I guess go and get this dungeon or do the dungeon around level 40 or so, and then just slam it on an amulet because you will be using Grasping Veins quite a lot. And that is a good bit of additional damage, right? Outside of that, anything like minion related, like there's a minion attack speed one that I can't find. I don't think it's in Codex though. There's a minion attack speed one that's pretty good. You can get Edge Masters is always pretty good, but I wouldn't recommend imprinting it. Splintering Aspect is decent. They did nerf it pretty significantly, so I don't know that I would recommend actually imprinting this early on, but once you have some more materials and whatnot, this actually, you know, is one of the better Bone Spear legendaries. But while leveling, I really wouldn't worry too much about going out of your way to get some. I guess this one's pretty good. Your skeletons gain increased damage while they're alive, but you have to go and get it and imprint it and all that stuff. Leveling is going to be super, super fast, so I would just focus on your Vampiric Powers and not really the aspects, and literally just get, you know, whatever you get while leveling, just slam that on. When it comes to stats to look out for on gear, pretty much same old. Just try to get ranks to Bone Spear, crit chance, lucky hit chance to restore primary resource is very, very good with Bone Spear because it has a very high lucky hit chance. And just look for anything that gives you like flat damage, like bone skill damage, straight up damage, damage to close, stuff like that. Keep in mind, always upgrading the weapon as quickly as humanly possible is the best thing to do. So just look out for weapons, and for the other pieces of gear, it's really not all that big of a deal. Movement speed on boots is pretty nice to get, but again, it's not really that big of a deal. All right, when it comes to the Vampiric Powers, we don't really know how we're going to acquire them early on into the game, if it's going to be really easy to get the one that you want, or if it's going to take quite a lot of time. I'm just going to go over ones that you guys should look out for. I do think that you randomly acquire them to some degree, so I'm just going to go over the ones that I think are particularly good. Min-maxing them while leveling is really not going to be a big deal, but there's some that are very low cost that actually are going to be really good early on. So I'll just go over all of them for both of the builds and talk about why I think they're good. I have a little bit of a list here, so let's just go over all of them. So first off, we'll talk about the minion ones that are really good. So Coven's Fang is pretty insane. Your minions do 52% increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Getting the secondary effect of this isn't really all that great. If you were to use this, I'd recommend putting on Decrepify somehow into your build, maybe getting rid of Corpse Explosion or getting rid of Golem or even getting rid of Iron Maiden. You put on Decrepify, that's just 52% extra damage with your minions. That's really insane. Obviously, though, if you're playing Blood Surge, that's not really going to help you. We have Feed the Coven, which is only 1 cost, which is really good. Your minions have a chance to spawn or just give you 10 primary resource and increase your damage by 10%. So if you have a lot of minions, you're going to be proccing this over and over again. Ton of extra primary resource, so you can just spam your Bone Spears even more. And also just straight up a damage increase. Domination seems like it'll be really good for pretty much any Necromancer build because every Necro build plays with Corpse Tendrils, right? So 24% increased damage to enemies who are stunned, which they always are if you're using Corpse Tendrils. Yeah, that seems like it'll be quite strong. Metamorphosis seems like it'll just be generally good for almost every build to just have an Unstoppable on your spacebar, but it is quite expensive. Prey on the Weak seems like it'll be good if you're just applying Vulnerable, which you can do with both builds because Corpse Tendrils can apply it. So 16% increased damage to enemies that are vulnerable. That just seems pretty free, right? For Blood Surge, Sanguine Brace seems like it'll be okay. When you kill an enemy, just Fortify. I think this will just be good in general, right? Like, even for Bone Spear, you kill enemies, you get Fortify, and if you have a good amount of Fortify, you get 8% crit chance for free. I think this will be pretty insane, and it is very low cost, so definitely look out for that. Fortify gives you survivability, but also when you're playing with Blood Surge, Fortify scales the damage that your Overpower does, so that'll be really good for you. And then there's Blood Boil here. This one seems like it'll be pretty expensive, and I don't really know how it'll play out, but when your Core Skull overpowers an enemy, you spawn some blood drops, and then collecting the blood drops causes it to explode, dealing some damage. It depends what this physical damage actually scales off of, but if you're overpowering quite a lot, and if it counts per enemy, if you get 3 blood orb or blood drops per enemy, that could end up doing a crap ton of damage for you. It really kind of just depends. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I'd recommend at least trying it out early on. The guaranteed overpower every 20 seconds, though, is pretty terrible. Very low uptime, in my opinion. Some other ones that are just generally good for survivability is Undying. I mean, this is insane. Casting Skills just heals you. I mean, if you want some survivability, that seems like a very good way to get some survivability, as well as Ravenous seems like it'll be unbelievably ridiculous, giving you, and I think almost every build will play this, it'll be insane with Blood Surge when you have enough attack speed or enough essence generation. You can get 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed. If you get 200% movement speed, which you can actually get by having movement speed on your amulet and movement speed on your boots with a movement speed legendary, that is an 80% increase to your attack speed, and it only costs 3. So that seems like it'll be pretty good for pretty much any build. For Bone Spear, not as much as Blood Surge, but still good. And then lastly, for some more survivability, Resilience seems like it'll be good for just damage reduction all the time. If you feel like you need some survivability, I mean, that is just pretty free. That's a lot of Vampiric Powers, but honestly, a lot of them are very good, and I wanted to give you guys all the options that are good for leveling because there's many of them, and I don't know how quickly you'll be able to get them, so feel free to just mess around with them. I think it'll be very, very easy to put them in and take them out. I don't think it'll be, like, locked in, so hopefully it'll be open to experimentation and pretty easy to mess with stuff, but that's pretty much it for the video. Sorry if it was a little bit long and a little bit detailed. Again, make sure to check out the website if you want to see exactly how to spend all your skill points, and I also have a list of some of the good Vampiric Powers there, and I will be updating the builds for endgame as soon as I get into the endgame and I have a Necro build ready for you guys. So feel free to subscribe for that if you haven't already. That's pretty much it for the video. Hopefully you found the video helpful. If you did, like, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Hope to see you guys over on Twitch, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.